this video, I'm going to show you how to quickly break down a beef tenderloin. A lot of times when you're at the grocery store and you buy the really expensive like fillets, well, if you buy the whole tenderloin like we've got here, it's less expensive per pound. You get a lot more out of it, but some people are intimidated because you don't necessarily know how to break it down. So we're going to show you really quickly how to break down a tenderloin. So the first thing is I like to open it up on some sort of pan to get all the the blood kind of dripped off of it, and so it's not much on my cutting board. And then from here, I typically butcher something in 3 steps. I first pull, then I scrape, and then I cut, right? And so I pull anything off that will easily come off. And with the tenderloin, you have this connective piece right here, and once you get that loose, it'll open up the 3 parts. So you have the main tenderloin itself, and you have the head, and you have the chain. This is called the chain. And so what I typically do is once I get this piece, it's usually about right here, broken apart, I come and open this up, take my thumb, and drag my thumb down the chain, pulling it apart, and it will just kind of separate. From there, you want to keep as much meat on the main tenderloin as possible. So when I'm cutting, I'm going to take my knife and cutting at an angle, like away from it. I'm going to cut an angle, and just to barely go through and separate until you get down to this extra piece. So this is kind of like an extra chunk of meat that is still part of the tenderloin, and it also comes into the chain. So depending on how you are going to utilize the whole tenderloin will depend on how you finish this off. But no matter how I'm finishing it, I still like to get as much onto the main tenderloin head as possible. So I'm just going to peel that down. And now my chain, the chain does get broken apart later. We'll go through and pull out as much meat as we can, and typically I eat that chain meat. And so we've got some good meat down here. It has a lot of connective tissue in it, but if you scrape it out, it is definitely edible and usable. So that was pulled. So I'm going to continue to pull off things. Some of the fat and stuff that you don't want just comes right off. So then I will flip it to the back side, see if there's anything to pull off over here. Depending on how well it was cut off the animal, you may have a lot back here, you may have a little bit. There's really not much on this particular one. So then I like to start on the top. So right here where this head piece connects, there's a seam. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to separate that seam. I'm just scraping my knife. So I'm scraping it until you see that this silver skin right here, there's actually more stuff to pull off. There. The membrane layer, get off. So here there is, the silver skin is here and it wraps up a little bit. So once I scrape and expose that, I just barely use the tip of my knife to cut through so that I can get that off. And then the way we get off silver skin and lots of fat is we typically come in underneath here and you make a handle. So I made a little handle to hold on to, and I come back and cut that off. Okay. So I'll make a handle, back, cut that off. Then I always turn the tenderloin to be in a better position for my arm, the way it works. So now I'm going to scrape. Using the back of my knife, I'll scrape things off, like the extra fat there. Sometimes I'll see if other things will scrape. And then we're going to continue to take off this silver skin. So I'm going to come up underneath it, turn my knife up and pull that out. There's my handle. And then I'm going to pull down against the tenderloin. So pull down, turn your knife up. And if your knife is sharp, it's just going to slide against that silver skin, leaving you with almost no meat left on there, which is good. You want to make sure the meat stays with the meat. Slide, and you just continue to repeat the process until you get all the silver skin done. Just a little piece. Now, at this point, meat is malleable, so you can push it and flatten it so that it matches with your knife. So I pushed it flat so my knife can get in there and get the rest of the silver skin down in here. And see, the silver skin does have an end to it. It's kind of right there in that crease, and I got that last little bit out. So the top is pretty much done, except for that little piece I missed right here. And right here. This is just, it's still a little bit of silver skin, but there's a little bit of fat underneath there. So then there's a couple other spots when you get to the back side, right? You have just any meat, any fat that is like thick, right, or gooey. Those are the kind of things you want to take off. So that's what I'm just pulling and getting those pieces off. So there's a little bit of scraping there. There's a little bit more silver skin right here. So I'll come underneath, there's this one piece, and it's always here. Slide that off. You can see this piece, it looks different than the rest. That one, and this one, and this one. There's another one right there. Those are connective tissues, and as soon as I pop that, it's probably going to spring back to see how that kind of had some tension on it. And so I'm going to make my handle, trim that off, make my handle, trim that off, make my handle, trim that off. All right, make the handle, trim that off, and there's, I didn't get that, all of that one, this little one. Yeah. All right. And just pulling. I try to cut as little as possible until we need to. All right, there's a look. I can probably just scrape that fat. And then there is a piece of connective tissue that's right in his crease. I just know it's there. And you can see it once I open it up. There's some silver skin. So I know it's there, so I'll get that out. Then you have this back part. Right, and you can see these lines like here and here, right? These are where this connected to the back side of the rib cage. And so there's always this big hunk of fat. Now this is good fat if you want to keep it. It's hard fat, some of it, and you could render this down and use it to cook your steaks in. So that would be a great utilization of that particular piece. But again, there's just some pulling that can happen. There's some pulling, there's also some scraping. I just scraping with the side of my knife and see how some stuff just comes off. See how that piece, that would be something that we could probably get some trim out of. And so here I am going to cut in and take off this, still a big, pretty much just a piece of fat. And here I don't want to take it down to where you just see meat. So this is where it's just meat, that color. I don't want to take it down completely to that. What I want to do, I still got more I can pull. There we go. What I want to do is just barely shave. There's another piece of connective tissue here. I'm going to barely just shave that off. Because I'm okay with the marbling that's underneath. So that amount of fat that's in here, I'm okay with that being in my steaks and going in my tummy. And I might just take there's a little bit extra fat here. Sometimes again, scraping will get that off. And if it doesn't, you can come back and you can cut it. I try to leave as much meat and fat that is usable on it. There's one little piece here. But to be honest with you, this is a little bit more connective tissue right in that spot. That is a well-trimmed tenderloin for making steaks. And so, like we were talking about, when you have the chain meat, you want to trim the chain meat so that you can at least utilize some of the meat for for you to eat. In restaurants, they use it for numerous recipes and things, because you don't really want to waste the good meat that's in here. Of course, it can't be a steak. So the chain meat here, you have lots of connective tissue, and you just don't have to worry about being pretty. I like to just, when I find the silver skin, you just find it and you cut it and you pull and just pull it, and then I will take more the end of the knife that's closer to me so I have more leverage, and I will scrape. Right? Scrape off some of the fat. And you have these silver skin strands that are in your chain. Right? You can kind of see the strands that run. It runs all the way down inside here. So I just try to scrape off things that don't look pretty. And then the parts like this that still have a little bit of meat in them, you can roast them off and put them in your stock, put them in your, if you're making some beef broth, you could do that too. So that's pretty clean, and I would eat this piece. And then that save a scrap. And so that you have more, you can see these lines down here. And you literally can scrape the meat almost like off of it. See, I got meat and left a lot of the silver skin behind. And so that's how you get kind of clean up the chain. There's still a bunch more down in here. You can spend a lot of time or a little bit of time on your chain meat. I guess that just depends. When you're buying this and it's for home use, spend some time. Eat all the meat you can, because there's more and more down inside here once you get it opened up. All right, so you can just continue on and clean out your chain meat and go from there. And hope that helped you. And if you have any more questions, you're welcome to reach out, make a comment, anything like that. But we'd be happy to continue to help you in your cooking journey. So thanks a bunch, and we'll talk to you soon. So once you've trimmed your beef tenderloin, and if you haven't seen that video, you can check out the video that we just made on how to trim a whole tenderloin. But then once you have this huge piece of meat, then it's like, what do I do with it? Well, it just depends. So if you're making a beef Wellington, you might cut out some of the larger portion and use it. If you're cutting it into steaks, then I'll show you the process for that. And so you can do a lot of different things with your beef tenderloin. Sometimes we just roast the whole thing, so I might tuck that in to make it more even, and I'll tie it. So you can roast it whole. You can take the center cut portion, either here, or some people actually go further if they want to incorporate some of the head and turn that into a whole, like a beef Wellington or something like that. Or we can cut it into steaks. And so we're going to cut this one into steaks. And so what you have to know kind of about the tenderloin itself, when you pick it up, it has weight to it, and it has different density. And so you can just feel the density of the center portion of the meat is so much more dense than down here. Right? And so down here, you kind of have like this is where I start, and you have the tail end. And the tail end, you can't do a whole lot with this little thin piece. As soon as you start to get a little bit wider, you can use it. So we'll cut that, and then we're going for 5-ounce portions. So we're gonna start with the first one and see how we do. Pretty darn good. And then this one, what you can do is you can push it down and form it into a steak. Don't think I haven't done that 100 times, okay? And then you have to be careful. You have to start adjusting as you go down. I mean, this end here is still not quite as dense as it is here. So this one might be a little bit wider, and as you work your way down, if you want to keep the consistent weight, steaks will have to get a little bit thinner, or you have to trim off the side, which depends on what your use is. If you want a nice, thick-looking steak, well then you're gonna have to trim it down. I would advise, if you want really tall steaks, to buy smaller tenderloins. And if you don't care, then you can buy the larger tenderloin, and it just gets a little wider and thinner, and you just have to make sure that you're cooking it right. And so if we're going 5 ounces, that's probably over. Okay. So now they're going to start getting a little thinner. because it just gets denser down at this portion. And so when you're cutting steaks, you want to try to keep it parallel. You want to try to keep your cuts parallel, because there's nothing worse than having a steak that's thick on one side and like thin on the other. You can't get an even cooking to it. So you want to make sure you try to keep your knife going straight down and at a good parallel lines. And when you get down to this part, just a little bit off of that one. Now, if your steak is way over, say this was really, really too heavy, I would most likely trim a little bit around the edge. I could come out here and trim the edge, rather than trying to trim a whole slice off of it, because then it keeps your steak taller and thicker and looks nicer that way. Let's get some of these out of our way. I like to have something to put my steaks on, some sort of pan. This one's lined with parchment paper. Okay. Now when you get to this portion, this is where you have to start making a call, because this piece is attached, kind of, right? And so you can't really get a whole steak with like these 3 different pieces at the end. And the head here, it's attached as well. But if you look at it, for when I'm trying to cut steaks, I'm gonna look at this and try to picture like a tube, right? 2 parallel lines coming down this way. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna cut it straight down so that this is now the same thickness, and I should be able to get some good steaks out of this one. Right. And that's gonna be a little heavy. Oh yeah. So here, that one was a little heavy. I'm gonna trim the least desirable portion off of it. Okay. Here. Pretty good. Then when you get down this small, well, don't just cut a portion, let's see what you got. Okay? So I've got almost 11 ounces. So if I get this one right, then I should be able to get 2 decent steaks out of it. So I'm gonna overcut that one too much, which I did. Let's see. Yeah, that one's gonna be a little small. So in the classroom here, I'll use this one for demonstration. I'll set it over here, and that'll be like the one I demonstrate during the cooking portion of our classes, and then the rest, the good ones, the thick ones, the heavy ones, go to our customers. Now you have this. So keep in mind, you've got a split here, and I don't mind using that split, right? As long as you've got something to hold it together. Like, if the steak was like here, I'll trim the end, and as long as you got something to hold it together, it's a decent steak. So I'm gonna weigh this one too. So I can't get 3 out of it. I'm gonna get 2. So if I'm gonna get 2, I will tip the end to give me a little square piece to sit on. And that's probably about where I wanna be on the money. And I have this one's left. It's heavy, so I will definitely trim off the least desirable part, where past the split. So I'm gonna start there. And when I do this person's gonna get a little extra meat, okay? Just because they've got that split. So I'm gonna make sure that that steak's a little extra for them. And again, once you do it, looks like a great steak. Yeah, it has a little split down there, but when it cooks, it'll cook up just fine. So that is just one way of portioning out a whole tenderloin. And if you want to save a little money and learn how to do these things at home, it'll be a benefit to you. So thanks so much.